there is an exhibit up at the Reginald Lewis Museum now that features a number of items from a specific collection there, the Stearns collection, and they all help add to our understanding of slavery in the state of Maryland. And I wanted to offer you this look.
So the Stearns collection was gifted to the museum over a period of time. There are 87 objects in this collection that document the history of slavery in the state of Maryland. These documents in particular are important to demonstrate this kind of dichotomy of how slavery is described by those who enslaved people versus those who were enslaved. So this case right here actually depicts what life was like and how life was in some instances recorded, fictionalized in Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is a very well-known narrative. This Carolina Lullaby was a song that would be played in the big house, if you will. But what I find interesting on this is this picture of a cotton boll, because that cotton boll depicted economic resources to the enslavers, but demonstrated incredible grief and hardship to those who were enslaved. And what we have on the cover inside of this bowl is an enslaved woman who is taking care of a white child. I think this image that is on the back of the wall is probably one of the most informative, yet one of the most horrifying that we typically see. So imagine being on a ship, in the bowels of the ship, packed as these human beings were. As you can see, if you were packing goods to come across the sea for sale, they packed as many in as they possibly could, because these people were no more than packaged goods. So if some packages got destroyed, okay, we just threw them overboard. But what we were concerned with was how much volume can we get in human flesh from one side of the world to the other. So this document here was signed by Judge Taney. Here we have his actual handwriting, knowing that he was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court when the Supreme Court made the Dred Scott decision, which basically said that African Americans did not have citizenship rights. Birth did not mean anything here in this country, nor did your living here. The people that were brought to this country, stolen from Africa, they had a full life prior to being stolen and brought to this country. These types of documents, these types of artifacts actually give us a glimpse into what that life was. These are the things that museums illuminate, but I then think it's important that in illuminating this information, that we have real conversation about this information to help people better understand what they're seeing and then help them connect it to where we are today.
And I want to thank Terri Freeman very much for allowing us in and for giving us that private tour. And Terri is gracious enough to join us today, and I'm thrilled, first of all, to have you here, and I want to welcome you. And we wanted Terri to join us today because we have some exciting news to announce, I think, in a matter of way. Speaking that the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project is going to be joining with the Lewis Museum to establish a permanent presence at the museum for the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project. And that's going to include a memorial to all known and unknown Maryland lynching victims. we're still in the early stages of developing this partnership, but we're looking jointly at developing an exhibit that's interactive and represents the history of racial terrorism and lynching in the state, and also covers the important history and work of the commission, the Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So of course, we're going to keep you posted about how they develop, but I want to thank Terri and also just Terri, ask you, to comment a little bit on the that upcoming partnership, what we hope.
Well, first, good morning, Will. Good to see you. And good morning to all of the participants of the conference, and congratulations on the conference this year. We're really excited to be able to partner with the Memorial Project. We think it's important to reflect the history, the full history of the state. And as a state institution, it's really important for us to reflect where these instances occurred and have the ability to show people what actually happened, and what that these names that we see were human beings, and that they represented families, and they represented history, but they also represented a future, right? That for them personally was snuffed out. And we want to recognize that these instances of, in many ways, state-sanctioned terror should never be forgotten. They should never be forgotten. That said, I think it's also important that we're able to learn from that and we move on. So as we recognize those individuals who were the victims, and as we talk about truth and reconciliation, my hope is that we will also, under kind of this banner, talk about repairing that breach, reparations. We can't have reconciliation in my book without some repair of the breach. So my hope is that that is the direction we will move in. And my hope is that the Lewis Museum can serve as an institution that can actually facilitate some of those conversations. So we're excited about the partnership. I'm so happy that I got a chance to meet you, Will, early on in my tenure here. And we look forward to people coming to see the Bodies of Information exhibition. It really is, it's very heavy documents, very heavy on archival information. But boy, is that how we learn history, and to actually see it. It can sometimes make the hair on your arms kind of stand up when you're realizing what you are seeing. But looking really forward to the continued partnership, because I think the partnership has already begun.
Absolutely, and thank you so much again. And I think it's, just to underscore what you were saying, I think it's critically, it'll mean so much to have a single focus, a single center for all of this scholarship, all of this remembrance, all of this conversation to happen. And I'm thrilled that it should be the Lewis Museum. And as you know, that's where we, 3 years ago, where our very first conference was held there. And we look forward to being there next year, hopefully, in the same capacity. So thank you again, Terri, so much for this. A few weeks ago, a friend of ours, Christopher Providence from Harvard Grace, told us about this performance that Debra Mims is going to be giving at the Art Center up there. Debra's she's lived in Washington for a long time. She's been an actress for over 30 years, which is hard to believe, and an art producer for PBS as well. For a while, she has worked with the young audiences of Maryland since 2000, and she has written her 7th solo performance, one-woman show on the life of Ida B. Wells. It's called Shine the Light of Truth, Ida B. Wells. And here to give us a glimpse of what's involved is Ida B. Wells. Welcome.
Thank you. Good day. I am Ida B. Wells. You may not remember me. It's been many years since I passed from memory to history. But my name has been called many times in 2020 and in 2021, and I am here. I have received in 2020 the Pulitzer Prize for Investigative Journalism posthumously, but I decided to come back and accept this award. I say the way to right wrongs is to shine the light of truth upon them. And that's what I tried to do by my living, writing, and speaking as a Black woman, shine the light of truth on the darkness of evil. If I may I share a pivotal moment in my life. 1892. I was almost 30 years old. I was living and working as a teacher in Memphis, Tennessee. And I was also a writer at the Memphis Free Speech and Headlight, a weekly Black newspaper. Freed Negroes had made progress in many areas. We built our own schools. We were educating ourselves. We were growing financially. In March of 1892, three friends of mine, Thomas Moss, Calvin McDowell, and William Stewart, opened a grocery store, the People's Community Grocery in South Memphis. It was doing well, perhaps too well, for the white store across the street. On the pretext of a dispute, a white mob attacked the store. Well, the Black people defended themselves, but the law arrested my three friends and put them in jail, pending trial. But there was no trial. Early the next morning, a mob came, got my three friends out of jail, shot, and hung them. Oh, how I grieved. I was godmother to Tom Moss's daughter. I was told that Tom Moss's last words were to tell my people to leave Memphis and go west because they will not find any justice here. I could not let that horrible crime pass without writing about it. I wrote newspaper articles decrying the lynching of my friends and other African Americans. At this time, there were many reports of men, women, and children being lynched, and I wanted to know why. My grief would not stop. It now became my work. Even though it was risky, I spent 2 months traveling to southern cities in the South where lynchings occurred. Because I wanted to find these reasons, I interviewed people, and I started reading the white newspapers to find these reasons. What I found was that the lynchings were not in response to a crime necessarily, but more of an effort to reinforce white supremacy, terror, and economic power over us. I published these findings in a pamphlet titled Southern Horrors. And in the Free Speech and Headlight, I urged Black people to leave Memphis altogether. I wrote, "There is therefore one thing left to do, but save our money and leave a town which will neither protect our lives nor our property, but murders us in cold blood when accused by white persons." It worked. Thousands of people started leaving Memphis and other small towns in the South. Those going west, they were going east, they were going north. Those going west were called the Exodusters, like the Israelites out of Egypt. As well, they began to boycott racist places. "Keep up the good work," I told them. I began to speak out to organizations, churches, community groups, politicians, even President McKinley, to stop the mob rule of lynchings. I said, America's national crime is lynching. It is not the creature of the hour, the sudden outburst of uncontrolled fury, or the unspeakable brutality of an insane mob. It represents the cool, calculating deliberation of an intelligent people who openly avow that there is an unwritten law that allows them, that put human beings to death without complaint under oath, without opportunity to make a defense, without trial by jury, without the right of appeal. I was giving a speech in New York in 1893. The speech went well. Afterwards, publisher T. Thomas Fortune told me that my expose about the lies that justified lynching so enraged the locals in Memphis that they broke into our printing offices, destroyed the press, and threatened my partners. As well, a bounty was placed on my head if I returned. This gave me pause. I began to carry a pistol for my protection. That's right. I'm outspoken and determined. I decided it was better to fight back than die like a dog or a rat in a trap. But I had faith. I was on my path, writing, marching, speaking, and protesting. I keep so busy working for the kingdom, keep so busy working for the kingdom, keep so busy working for the kingdom, Lord. I ain't got time to die. Shine the light of truth. I am Ida B. Wells.
Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. That was spectacular, Debra. I really appreciate it. And I urge Christopher Guest, Providence has already kindly added the information in the chat window. You can check it out there. So all of you might want to take advantage of that, especially those who live up there. Debra Mims as Ida B. Wells, and that will be at the Haverty Grace Performing Arts Center in February. Thank you so much again, Ms. Wells and Ms. Mims. I appreciate it. We're going to move on now and tell you a story that just kind of landed in my lap a few weeks ago, and it was just stunning to me. I got a call from John Ashworth, who is with the Lynching Sites Project of Memphis, and he said that he has a story that may interest me, and it was about a Baltimore-born man who overcame considerable hardship and very humble circumstances to become a Tuskegee airman. But his life ended, tragically, and in the waning days of World War II. And here to tell us about this Lieutenant Manning's life, we're going to have Colonel Harry Stewart, who is himself a Tuskegee airman and was a friend of Walter Manning and flew with him on that same mission where he was captured. And Barbara Williams, who has chased down the story of Manning's life down to every corner of the earth, and John Ashworth, who kindly told me about the story. And I believe it's John's birthday today, so happy birthday, John.
Yes.
Thank you. So I want to start, before we hear from them, just want to start this. This is, Jenny Lyles, who's our historian and researcher extraordinary. She was able to dig up, this is the birth certificate of Lieutenant of Henry Manning, and it shows that he was born on, I can't see it now because these other things are here, May 3rd in 1920. Yeah, there we go. And this is really how it started. Now I'm going to allow our guests to tell us how it all happened. Barbara, or
John.
John, yes.
Good morning, Will, and good morning to all the panelists and to all the people attending. And thanks for having us from the Lynching Sites Project. Very quickly, the Lynching Sites Project started in 2015 much like from a speech made by Brian Stevenson. And we have documented in Shelby County alone over 35 lynchings that took place in Shelby County. We know that there were a little over 500 lynchings and near lynchings in the state of Tennessee. But the other thing I'd like to say about this is that about a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years ago, Barbara told me about Lieutenant Manning, and I asked her if she would do the research and do a presentation to the Lynching Sites Project about the life and she did an extraordinary presentation that you're going to hear in a few minutes. But I want to make just one very quick observation, turn it over to her. A historian has said that as Europe developed into conflicts in 1939, one historian has written that by exporting arms to the democratic countries, the United States hoped to become the arsenal of democracy. What that historian did not go on to say that one of the other things that the United States exported was this idea of the lynching of African Americans. And that, of course, as you will hear, is the fate that befell Lieutenant Manning. And I would go on to add that as I think about his story, then I think about the story of African-American servicemen during the Revolutionary War, during the Civil War, during World War I, during World War II, on down to present day. And so I think in many ways, Lieutenant Manning, who is no longer with us, and Colonel Stewart, who is with us today, represents the essence of all the African-American soldiers that have fought for freedom while defending their own freedom. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Will, and congratulations on being placed in the Lewis Museum in Baltimore. That's really a nice thing. The birth certificate that you saw says that he was born, Walter Peyton Manning was born in Johns Hopkins University, hospital there in Baltimore. The next time we see him is in Philadelphia. There's a 1930 census which places him living in a home without his mother, but with a sister of the mother and the sister's husband. We have no records as of yet as to where he went to school, but all of the addresses that we have found, and there are 3 in Philly, are from West Philly. He registered for the draft July the 1st, 1941. He would have been 21 years and a couple of months old. And I found a description on his registration card. He had brown hair, brown eyes. He was of light brown complexion, and he was 162 pounds, 5 feet 10. He failed his first physical after he registered. And why? He had a hammer toe. Now, if you do not know what a hammer toe is, it might be called a mallet toe, but it basically says the 4 toes of your hand, usually one of those toes will be constricted. The tendons or the ligaments or the muscles just don't extend and flexed. So you end up with one foot, that's permanently in this position. And one of the ways that you can get rid of that is to have surgery. So the Army registration says that Manning had held at least 2 jobs. One was a locker boy in a Philadelphia, Montgomery County country club. And he also was a machinist. I don't know what his salary would have been as a locker boy. I certainly hope the tips were good, but he had the surgery. He was successful. He took the exam for the U.S. Army Air Force for pilot training. He had always wanted to fly, according to Colonel Stewart. The minimum on that test to pass was 83. The max was 150. He scored 119. So on April 1st, in March 15th of 1943, he was accepted into the U.S. Army Air Force as a pilot. And by, and by August of 44, he was transferred to Ramitelli Air Force Base in southern Italy. On April 1st, 1945, a year had passed, and he had completed about 50 sorties, a mission escorting bombers coming back successfully. On this particular April 1st, he shot down one German firefighter, but he was hit by another. And out of the 7 men, the 7 pilots who were flying that mission that day, 3 were shot. One plane crashed, a Tuskegee airman crashed and was killed. A second one, the plane was hampered, but the pilot was able to fly out and land in a friendly air base where today, some time ago, it was called Yugoslavia, and he was able to get back to Ramitelli. The third plane was that of Second Lieutenant Walter Peyton Manning. He was able to bail out. The plane crashed. He was picked up on the ground by Austrians who had decided to kill him because that's what the German philosophy was. And the philosophy had an official title. It was called Flieger, Lynch, Justice. Flieger is flyer or aviator. Lynch is lynch, I guess in anybody's language. And justice is spelled with a Z, but it still means the lack of the proper justice. So he was turned over to the local police in an up and coming town called Lynched. That was where they were, excuse me, they were in the country of Lynched, having flown in from Ramatelli, and they were on their way back. Lynched is about today, in today's train, it's about an hour, maybe an hour and a half west of Vienna. It's north of the Alps. So he was placed with the Austrian police. He was held for at least 2 nights, and probably either the late second night or possibly the third morning, early morning, 2 German officers entered the jail, and they had fake papers which allowed Manning to be released to them. They took him outside. They strung him up by a rope. He hung by a lamppost for several hours until one of the workmen there at the airport where he was being held came and they took him down. What you're going to see next is a video. And the land where you see this video is the spot where he actually was hung at the Linz Horshing Airport. The Austrian Department of Defense and Sport, this is the National Department of the Defense and Sport, had initiated some 20 years ago what happened to approximately 1,700 Allied air crewmen who were shot down in Austria alone, but survived the crash. And they were able to find that Second Lieutenant Walter Peyton Manning, a victim of figure lynch justice, but was a victim of the actual rope lynching, not just being shot or killed or bludgeoned in some other way. So they decided to honor him. In 2015, they found this information. In 2018, which is when the video you're going to see is April 1st, which is 73 years to the date that Colonel Stewart and Manning and 5 other pilots went on this last sortie for Manning. They decided to honor his horrific sacrifice in 2018. The other thing I want you to know about this video is that until this video was done, even though the research had been completed 3 years before, until the video was done, no one knew of the lynching by a rope. Family didn't know, excuse me, they just knew that he had been shot down in Austria. The person whom you're going to hear speaking is Colonel retired Harry Thaddeus Stewart Jr. At age 97, I think I'm correct, Colonel Stewart, that you are one of only 12 surviving Tuskegee pilots and eight. And you are one of several more of all the Tuskegee airmen who held different positions within the US Army Air Force. You will see only Austrian military in this video because it is at the spot where Manning was hung. And there is a flyover. He was a pilot after all, but you will not see that. But you will see and hear Colonel Stewart speak about Manning and the reason why they're there today. So Will, if you will.
I would be happy to. I wondered if right before I do that, if I could ask Colonel Stewart a question, which is, how did you learn about what happened to Lieutenant Manning?
Well, actually, what happened was the mission that we went on at that time to Austria, and that happened to be on a Sunday, April 1st, 1945. Lieutenant Manning was listed as missing after that mission, and it was years later, quite a few years later, that an investigation had taken place, and his remains were discovered, and also through depositions of people who were witnesses at the time there testified as to the manner of death that he was meted with in Austria.
It's horrible. Full story. So let's watch the video now. Thank you.
Well, we're doing here memorializing Walter Manning. And it was nearly this date, 73 years ago, that we were on a fighter sweep in this area of the country here. And that's when Walter got shot down, and later on, about 3 days later, met his demise at the being captured by a mob and executed at the time. Name is Harry Stewart, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force, retired. I met Lieutenant Manning sometime before that, maybe a year and a half before that. We both went in the service together, and we went to the same field where we trained at. I joined up with him in the same squadron when I went overseas, and joined him in the 301st Fighter Squadron in Ramitelli, Italy at the time. Manning was quite a guy, you know, and he wanted to fly very, very badly. He wanted to get his pilot's wings and do his duty for his country, and I guess he did all he wanted to do as far as the flying was concerned. That was what he was chiefly after. He wanted to be a fighter pilot. Well, it certainly means a great deal to me, being, you know, one of the 6 pilots who flew along with him when he met his demise. But the other thing is that the people of the United States know nothing about what actually happened to Walter Manning. And I'm hoping with all of this that we can take the story back to the United States and let the people know what had happened to him.
Company!
The biggest thing was the extent that the government had gone to memorialize the memory of Walter Manning, but also the display, the pageantry that they put on at the time there was just beyond any expectations that I had. And now the memorial that we see that stands over to the side of us is quite a tribute to the memory of Manning. Today we turn out to be allies, and quite comfortable allies. I think that he would be very forgiving and of the demise that he had, and I think that he would be very pleased with the memorial that had been named in his honor.
If I may, I'd like to read the English translation of the plaque you just saw where Colonel Stewart saluted. This is the spot where Second Lieutenant Walter P. Manning was murdered on the night, either the 3rd or the 4th of April, 1945. Walter P. Manning was born in 1920 in Philadelphia, and when he grew up, he was a member of the American 332nd Fighter Group, 15th U.S. Army Air Force. His airplane was shot down just south of Lynched on the 1st of April, 1945. National Socialist officials and members of the German Air Force organized a hunt that ended with the hanging of Manning. Manning is one of the countless victims from the so-called aviator justice that the Nazi injustice regime unleashed against Allied aircraft crew in 1944. And then there's a space, and then they say, with an exclamation point at the end, they say, honor his memory.
Barbara, thank you so much. And this work that you've done to document all this, you are honoring his memory, and I can't thank you enough for that.
Welcome.
And I want to say before we just go on is that, if we get this installation, well, I should say when we get this installation at the Lewis Museum, I want to be more positive about that. But we will certainly make a place to honor Lieutenant Manning there. It's too important. It's such a tragic story, and the dedication that he showed, the determination to become a flyer, and yet to meet not only the end that he met, but the indifference from his country is tragic. I wanted to ask you, Colonel Stewart, what do you remember about him? What kind of a man was he? And go ahead.
Well, he certainly was a very likable chap, and we had the same endeavors as far as wanting to be pilots were concerned. And I had flown a number of missions with him before. He was a few classes ahead of me as far as graduation as a pilot was concerned, and therefore he had more missions than I did. I'd like to mention that the total number of missions to fly as a fighter pilot overseas at the time there, before you were sent home on rehabilitation, was 50 missions. And he had 50 missions, or might have exceeded that by maybe 1 or 2 missions. But he certainly was on register to go home at that time there. And if it wasn't for that fateful flight that he was on April 1st there, he would very likely be with us today. I'd like to also say that the memorial that took place in Austria took place April 1st, 2018, which was the 73rd anniversary of the demise of Walter, or the time that he went down. So in answer to your question before, as the timing of this was concerned, it was 73 years before he was fully recognized and given that memorial in Austria. And at the time there, as far as the lynching was concerned, is the depositions that were taking place by a number of the witnesses to the event. Anyway, I sort of lost the trend right there, but anyway, that was the 73rd anniversary, and sometime later, through a lot of research by both the Austrians and the American Graves Commission as to what had happened factually as far as Lieutenant Manning was concerned.
So I also know that you were very instrumental in making that day happen, and I wanted to know, I wanted to ask you why this was so important to you.
Well, it's important to me because I was surprised to find out here's a foreign country. Certainly it was one of our adversaries at the time there, but a foreign country who recanted and took the moral courage to recognize the indignity that Walter Manning suffered. And they tried their best to pay some type of tribute to him by giving this a memorial. Yet, this was unknown by the people of the United States. A few people in the government intelligence service knew about it, but none of the people of the citizens of the United States, including the Black diaspora, knew anything of what was going on. And I just felt that it just would be so fitting to have some type of memorial given this day in the United States here for the dedication to his service, the citizenry, that type of thing as far as he was concerned.
Barbara, you mentioned a book that
I do, and I just put that in the chat. Colonel Stewart has written a book called Soaring to Glory, a Tuskegee Airman's First-Hand Account of World War II. And I also wanted to put in the middle of typing another book. There is something called Missing in Action, Failed to Return. It is a PDF, and it lists all of the something under 1,700 deaths.
Here it is.
There you go. Of airmen, Allied airmen, who were shot down, survived the crash, but somehow under Fliegerlied's justice were killed before they were to be turned over a POW system and all of that. But the first 16, 17 pages are the philosophy of why the Austrian government did what it did, because it not only did this event on April 1st, 2018, but they've also done museum pieces, because they found that not only is the World War II participant memory being lost, but people who have heard the stories are beginning to forget, and it seems to be purposeful forgetfulness. And Austria wanted to remind people that these 1,700, plus the ones who went home directly, are the reason why Austria is free today. I worked in Austria one summer, in fact, in this very same town, and I remember my boss telling me, Barbara, we never thought we'd get rid of the Russians, because from 45 to 50, Russia took over Austria and finally were forced out. But she said, I never thought we'd get rid of them. And those are the memories that they want people to know how tenuous anybody's national security actually is.
It can't escape notice that, and Nick Creary actually wrote it in the comments, that it's more than ironic that the Austrian government has done more to memorialize and apologize for a victim of lynching than the US government has. John, there was a question for you as well about the connection between the NSDAP, fascist racial ideology and white supremacy practices in the United States. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, let me speak to that. In fact, if you saw me, I was looking for an article that I had on my desk, because I also subscribe to newspapers.com. And there was an article that appeared in 1936. And what the article said was Hitler had agents in the United States that already had to exterminate African Americans if they had won the war. But the other comment I want to make, there's a very interesting book out, and I can't think of the author's name now, but the title of the book is Hitler's American Model. And that book very clearly articulates how it was that the Nazis looked at Jim Crow practices in the United States to come up with their plan for what they were going to do with Jews in Germany. But yes, there is that connection between the Nazis and white supremacy. It's all based on the same thing. And they actually, as a matter of fact, when you read the book, Hitler's American Model, what you find out is that some of the practices that the United States had doing Jim Crow.
We lost your audio there, John.
I'm sorry. No, as I started to say, when you read the book, one of the things that you'll find out is that the book, Hitler's American Model, is that the Nazis even thought some of the practices that the United States had went a bit too far insofar as racism is concerned. So yes, there is a definite connection between Nazism and white supremacy. It's all tied together.
There was a related question from Pat Halley about asking whether or not the Nazis lynched white and black soldiers, or was it, go ahead, Barbara.
The hearsay is that yes, they did. And there is another book out, came out in I'm sorry, I don't remember it, last year, I guess, 2020. And the author, works in a German university, but he used some of the same research areas that the other two authors of Missing in Action researched. And he found, and other people, and I think Colonel Stewart has said, over the years, people have found cases or have heard of cases where people were lynched with a rope, both white and black, but they haven't been verified.
Interesting.
May I say that a total of 7 black pilots from the 332nd Fighter Group were listed as missing in the book Missing in Action here. And some of them, they still haven't found their remains there. They still continue to be listed as missing in action, but there is one that I had mentioned to you, Barbara, I believe, that we had just gotten recent word that he had been pitchforked to death by a group of people. So there was others other than Walter Manning there that probably met a rather horrible death there as far as the being captured is concerned.
Well, I can't thank you enough for bringing us this incredibly important and sad story. It needs to be known, and we're honored to have all of you join us today. And Colonel Stewart, we thank you, of course, for everything and for your service and for being here and for standing up for your friend. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Very much. I really appreciate it. All righty.
Well, one last thing, I will send you a copy of that newspaper article that talks about Hitler's and his agents and wanting to kill Americans if they had won. And you can give it to everyone.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
I'll include it in our next newsletter.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all again so very much.
You're welcome.